Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home. I'm AV Club Editor-in-Chief Patrick Gomez, and the SAG-AFTRA Foundation has a COVID-19 relief fund to support SAG-AFTRA artists with basic needs like rent, food, and healthcare costs during this global pandemic and industry shutdown. Donations are 100% tax deductible and directly support performers in dire need. Information on how you can support this effort can be found in the description of this video. Thank you for everything that you're doing to help other artists at this time. But of course, you are here to hear from the lovely Uzo Aduba. So I'd like to welcome Uzo. Thank you so much for joining us for these conversations. I know it's usually done in person, and we get to have a fantastic audience of SAG-AFTRA members. But I'm glad that we were able to do this at least remotely. And thank you for welcoming us into your home.
Please, thank you for having me. I think this is great that we're able to still continue the conversation, though we're not able to be out doing the work.
How has that actually been for you? Obviously, an actor's life, and particularly one that is working as much as you are, you're constantly moving from project to project. What has it been like to kind of have these moments to kind of be stationary and home?
You know, it's obviously I miss working, and I do, or doing things outside of my home, which in general, at large, that's been missed because it feeds so much of my life. But at the same time, I'll say two things. One, it's been a welcome, I guess, gift of like slowing down and being able to spend that time that you just generally used to gab on the phone with your friends and with my family in particular, that just I didn't have before. And then I had said to someone maybe about a month ago, there is a part of my life of acting or inspiration that I haven't been able to explore of late in recent years, which was observation. I used to, when I first came to New York in particular, used to be on the subway or when I was waiting tables and waiting on people or waiting at line and auditions, whatever. You meet all these people and you don't even realize how many people are characters until you start watching someone on the subway and you're like, that is a character. I am now taking this person in and, I'm going to file that away and I'm going to use that in some scene because I know that's a real honest reaction to this particular thing. And so I live in New York, I live in Brooklyn, and there's a park nearby, and I'll go and I'll sit, socially distant, and that opportunity that I used to have to really sit and take people in, that has been something that has come back. Watching people take space has been very interesting, and heightened awareness of when someone's coming and are they coming into your space and are they wearing a mask, aren't they socially distant or not, are you 6 feet, all these things. So that has been something that I used to do that it's been nice to be able to do again.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm glad you're finding silver linings, as we all kind of have to do to maintain our sanity right now. Obviously, there's a lot of production that's been halted, and the pandemic, in addition to all of the emotional and health tolls that it's taken a toll on this community. Before we get into your fantastic recent work and journey, I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of what you see as what's most needed in the acting and production community right now in terms of just moral support and providing opportunities when possible to do things like this.
Yeah, I think the things that are most needed in our community right now are safety and support. For safety, when we go back to work, really spending this time, those people who support are not just actors, but everything that it takes to make a project go, DGA, SAG, AFTRA, everybody, PGA, everybody. Hair, makeup, everybody in crew, making sure that when we go back to work, it is a place that is thriving, not just surviving, for everyone. That everybody's safety is being held into account, taken care of, safeguarded. I think that's one, because everybody wants to go back to work. I think everybody wants to go back to work when it is safe to do so and in an environment that is protective of everyone. So that's one, background, everyone. Support, I loved what you were saying just there at the top about donations and programs that are set up right now to help support and provide relief to our community in this desperate time. We've been hit from an acting end, but we've also been hit from a hospitality end as well. Before starting into this medium, I worked in the restaurant business. And these are two entities that are not right now having a life, that are lifebloods for the acting community. And so as much support as we can provide to everybody is absolutely necessary, because when we get out of this, it's going to require a real team effort, a team lift, to make sure not just the people at the top who have the comfort, but everybody who is the real body of the Screen Actors Guild is being looked after and taken care of.
There. I want to jump to, obviously, you've been able to do so many things in your career so far, and I'm sure you feel very fortunate for all that. But many audiences got to know you on Orange is the New Black, and that was such a fantastic and long experience for you to get to have. Obviously, you found some fantastic success with Miss America and many other projects during and since your time on that show. But I'd love to kind of jump to when you were beginning to transition from that show, when it was announced the show was ending, when you knew that your time on the show was coming to an end. How did you kind of process the end of that journey and figure out what was next for you?
I think the first part, when it was coming to the end, firstly, we got that information, I want to say it was like a year before it was announced, or at least I knew that the season 6, I knew we were going to be done. Season 7 was going to be the last, at the start of 6. And so we had that year of process of getting our minds as a cast wrapped around that. I sure definitely did and needed that. And then for me, season 7 really became about returning to season 1 in terms of the newness, because it was the first time everything was going to be new again since season 1, because season 1 was the first time I'd ever done anything on television. And now season 7 was the first time I was ever going to end something on television. And so episode 1 came, and I remember walking out the door and I was like, Uzo, you have to enjoy all of this, because this is the last time you're going to do this. This is the last episode 1 of Orange is the New Black. So enjoy it. And I just kept saying that and making sure, I guess, to say the full goodbye, because so many of our directors we'd worked with season in, season out. And so, yeah, that experience, when Erin Feely was directing her last episode, and knowing that was the last time we we're going to do an episode with Erin, Michael Trim, who has my heart, Trim's last episode, just making sure to really live those out. Gus, all these guys, seeing our crew, seeing actors, our fellow cast members, when it was the wrap on each character. Adrienne Moore, I remember we worked together on her last day, her last scene, and just saying the goodbyes of those characters and those roles, not of those people in my life. But that was, I guess, long answer to that, but that's the process.
That's what we're here for. I'm just here to interject as little as possible. We just want to hear your story. And then in terms of your career, a lot of people, obviously it's a blessing to have a job that lasts as long as a series like Orange is the New Black. But when you were looking for new opportunities, were you looking for something in particular? Were you looking for something completely different? Was it just something that excited you? What was your kind of thought process, and what was going to be the right next career move for you?
My thought process was I really just wanted to work on something as good, as exciting, and like a fingers crossed that had something to say. Because I also remember as we were finishing orange on that last season, which sounds like bizarre now to say because I just went into Miss America, but it's like I was saying to myself a lot, like, Uzo, really enjoy this, because like you probably are not going to work with this many women again, this many like female different stories that has something important to say. Literally, those are like my three things. I was like, you might get something with like a bunch of women, but it's going to be like maybe fluff or something, or maybe it's with women and the opportunity to stretch as actors won't be the thing, you know what I mean? But it might have something to say, you know what I mean? But you probably aren't going to get to do this with as many women, and certainly not probably with as many women behind the scenes. Cut to like 5-6 months later, and they're like, Mrs. America would like to do you to be in that show. It's like, oh, like, so I'm gonna get to do this again. Like, that's, I guess, okay, never mind, toss that one out. But what I wanted was really just something that just was good. I just wanted something that was good, something that like charged me, and hoped that it would have something like honest and fresh or important to say.
Well, you certainly did find that. So let's talk about Miss America. I'd love to start at the beginning of that journey. You mentioned you got a call. Like, what was that call like? What were those conversations like? What was the process like to even getting on set?
Right. Okay. So I got the call, and I was on a Skype call with Stacy Schur, our producer, Davi Waller, who is our showrunner and creator, and Carmen Cuba, our casting director. And it was awesome. It was just, we were talking about politics, women in politics, the voice of women. And I remember really, and it was just a range of things. I don't even really remember, but maybe like the last 5-10 minutes, we were talking about the show. We talked about Shirley, but not necessarily in the context of the show. But I just really remember these were the women who were behind the scenes. They were smart. They were strong. They were passionate. They had a vision. They were charged to tell this story, and they were really animated and excited about creating space for these characters who cultural time had seemingly forgotten. History, they're in our books, and you take a women's history class, we learn about them, but culture they weren't present in our minds, a lot of them. And it was exciting to feel like these women who were monumental figures in this second wave feminist movement were going to have their voices heard in this time. And I thought that felt like something I wanted to be a part of.
In terms of getting to portray Shirley, how much did you know about her beforehand? Did you find there was extra pressure in playing a real person? Did you enjoy the fact that there was so much to research and watch? Walk me through your kind of coming to terms with playing someone that was so well known, at least in her time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she was a hero of mine. I grew up in a house. My mom loved Shirley Chisholm. I didn't know why I loved her. I was like, I love her too, but I didn't know anything about her. Like, just I knew that she liked her. And then I grew up and moved to New York. And when I moved to New York, I bought this book called The African American Century, from 1900 to 99, that chronicled iconic monumental figures in time, and she was in it and had a section devoted to her, and that was when I learned a lot about her. So then when I was approached with playing her, that washed over me for a second. So I was like, I love Shirley Chisholm, and I was like, and you want me to play Shirley Chisholm? Okay, so you feel that wave of overwhelming feminine, and the honor of it, as cliche as that sounds. But then I started getting to work and thinking about, okay, what do I want to say about Shirley Chisholm? Because I could do her, and we have hosts of footage about her, you know, of her talking, giving speeches, interviews, whatever. And I could do that person, but then the question hit me, well, then why don't we just watch the YouTube videos? Like, if we already have that story. So what are we here to do, really? And then it became for me about wanting to tell the parts of her and show the parts of her that we never got to see publicly. Because there was this documentary that I watched called Unbought and Unbossed on Shirley Chisholm's run for president. And it's this like seconds, Patrick, like of at the end of the doc where she's releasing her delegates and she folds into her hands and cries, like sobbing in her hands. And she sounded so vulnerable and so open. And I remember being like, that's the woman that I want to know. Because this cry is not just about releasing delegates. You know, I could feel the weight of those tears, of what that journey had been for her, to be the first, to be alone, to be left alone. And then suddenly, and I knew, I was inspired by this idea, oh, she's been tasked with doing the impossible in a time where people see you in a very specific way. The world has a very specific definition of who you are, and that definition does not line up with the definition you hold for yourself. And then that became my entry point, because I knew what that felt like, to feel like people are telling you what you are capable of and giving you your limits, and knowing that that's not how I see myself. And then that became an interesting story to me that I wanted to share.
And you know, I mean, she was dealing with it as a double minority, of course, which adds, you know, exponential layers of difficulty to the situation. You know, this is also a period piece. Mm-hmm. And you know, as much as you said you didn't want it to be, you know, watching YouTube documentary footage of Shirley, how much went into the time period? And obviously there's the clothing and the props and everything that the show, you know, the show looked fantastic and like it was right out of that era in terms of the extent to which everyone went to make sure it looked that way. But aside from those outside pressures of society, what other aspects of the fact that it was a period piece come into play? Or do you kind of let that go and just say the props and costuming does that work for me?
I think I let that part do the work for me, in terms of, because first of all, we had amazing people, you know, Ann Morgan, who designed the wig, to Bina, who did all of that fabulous costume work. And you let that live, because it's there. It's going to, rather than me try and wear the time through my performance, the clothes are there already setting the space. I think even really what the time really, what the costuming and hair helped me with in terms of the time was I understood suddenly how she was using the fashion and the clothes of those times as a Black woman, an intersectional woman at that time. Her hair, she wasn't just wearing her hair that big because of the time. She wasn't wearing those prints that loudly just because of the time. She was wearing that stuff because she was a very tiny, both in stature and frame, woman who was also a woman, who was also a Black woman. And if she did not take up that much space, she would be invisible in those rooms. And that's why her hair was that big. That's why her clothes were that loud. And that was what helped me to understand the time, that this was a woman who really had a keen ear to understand the time she lived in, and what it was, she had the kind of noise she'd have to push through for what she was saying to be seen and heard.
I think this piece would have been fantastic. It's a fantastic acting piece and has a lot to say for any time, but I think it's particularly a necessary piece for us to see right now in this moment in our history, particularly political history in this country. What has been some of the most rewarding things that you've seen or heard from people that have watched this series, what then that they've taken away from it?
Okay, definitely the most rewarding thing is seeing my friends who, like my millennial generation, and then like Gen Zers, you know what I mean, who don't know these figures readily, to be knowing and be excited by these names. That's what I think is probably exciting. We have so many strong figures, from our dear Rose, who was doing the heavy task of carrying a Gloria Steinem, who we all know, right, and did a beautiful job with that. But then there are the names that we should know. I think that's the thing that's so beautiful about Mrs. America, is that it brings into the fold the names of those titans who have been forgotten over time. It wasn't a one-man band who led the women's movement of the 70s. We should know the names of a Shirley Chisholm, a Bella Abzug, a Betty Friedan, a Jill Ruckelshaus, a Margaret Sloan, a Flo. You know what I'm saying? We should know all of these names right at the tip of our tongues, because it took all of those women, and all of those women, by the way, who played those performances brilliantly, Tracy, Margot, Niecy, Bree, Elizabeth, everybody, and of course our top note leader, Kate. It took every single one of the women in the story to get us pushed forward. And everybody, men and women, we should all know those names. And I think that's like been the exciting thing. Like I have like friends and young girls and like, you know, people wearing like Shirley tees and things like this who just didn't know, you know what I mean? It's like that RB, you know, like a couple of years ago, like RBG was getting like Notorious RBG, you know what I mean? We were really knowing her, not just like, who's that lady on the Supreme Court? It's like knowing really what she was about, how she got there.
This is a fantastic ensemble piece. You were just rattling off just a small number of the amazing women that were part of this cast, and men, of course. But what is the key? Because I think a lot of acting classes focus on scene study, and it's you and your scene partner, and you know that could be one, maybe two other people, maybe three, you know, in an odd case. But this was a lot of scenes with a lot of you, and sometimes you're the focus and sometimes you're not. How do you approach a big ensemble scene? Both one that you might be a central figure in, and another that you might be more of just a member of the ensemble.
Sure. With a lot of Sondheim. No, just kidding. I think we did a lot of singing in between takes. That's why I said that. For big scenes. You approach, I mean, I think you approach it with any other approach to it, whether it's a two-hander, you know, or a three-hander. When you have a lot of people, I think it requires active listening. If it's not about you, it is still about you, because in the sense that you are still required to be present for these people who have a lot of the front stage work to do. And in order for that front stage work to be strong, to be focused, to be visible, to be heard well, it requires everybody downstage or upstage behind them to also be giving them their full energy. That's how I see it anyway. And that means my job, if I don't have a word in the scene and I'm just there listening, then I need to be the most active listener that I can possibly be, or else focus splits. And it's not as, you know, centered or strong as it could be, you know, if I'm over here giving you half of my attention. And then just from like a general actor courtesy place, like I wouldn't appreciate that, you know what I mean? So you have to be giving your castmates and your colleagues as much as of your attention as you have in you, you know, you just have to. And I think it just makes everything richer, better. And I'll say one last piece. I think I don't think just because you don't have lines means you have the permission to check out. I think there is a lot to be said and done without a word on the page. You know, that you're still there, your character is still there and has an opinion and a thought about what's being said. And so that means there is something to do, whether that's with your face or whether that's with a just slow turn of hearing something. There's still action for you to perform, and that's what makes it alive.
It's been fantastic to see Shirley's name mentioned so much recently with the recent announcement of Kamala Harris being on the ticket with Joe Biden. No delusions of grandeur that Miss America made that happen. But is there a little bit of a sense of pride for Shirley that her name is being mentioned so much now, not just because of the show, but because of actual things happening in our American politics?
For sure. For sure. I don't think it's, like what you just said, I don't think there's delusion that like Mrs. America made that happen. But I do think the show was asking the question, how far have we come? And we answer far or not, given, yesterday's announcement. I think what more than anything, having read and watched so many scenes of hers, interviews of hers, something that was important to her was paving a way. And she wanted to create space for the next person. She wanted, famously saying, if you're not invited to the table, pull up a folding chair. So she wanted to create a space at the table, a place at the table. And she did. She set that table well. And it's not lost on anyone, I don't think, the seat that she gave and provided for those who came after her is squarely room that she's made for a Kamala Harris to exist.
Looking in your own industry and in terms of acting, what are situations where you feel like you had to pull up a chair to the table? And how do you feel like that's propelled you to where you are?
That's a great question. I think, one that comes from me, being myself, if I'm being quite honest. It's so easy to change yourself and do it because you're being told that's what needs to happen to push yourself forward. Like I was saying, like the definition being set on you. When I first moved to New York, I met with an agent who had seen me in a show and thought I did great work and wanted to work with me. And we're having this back and forth in the meeting, like blah, 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 I like you, da, 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 da. And then she reaches the end of her spiel and she says, now your gap, what are we doing about your gap? Are you keeping it or are we closing it? Are we keeping it? And it was we, I remember. And I remember thinking we, like, she's asking me if we're gonna both, shampoo our hair this weekend, like kind of a thing, are we both closing our gap? And that was something that I had spent years in my early age growing up making peace with, being African, my mother telling me that that was a sign of beauty in Africa, a sign of wisdom, something to be celebrated. And I remember in that moment having the thought to myself, like flash second, like, am I about to take that out, like close it, or am I going to keep it? And I remember saying, yeah, we're keeping it. And I knew in myself that might not be what was wanted of me, I guess, expected of me, that I should be, like, if I wanted to get X, Y, and Z, I should probably close it. But there was something in me that just said, I am enough, just like this. Like, whoever wants to draw towards me and whatever work is meant for me will come with me being all of myself, And I guess that would be where I felt that felt that, being that push to change. And I'm really glad I didn't. You know, every day I'm more and more happy that I did not, you know, because I could have. And it would have been fine. I'm sure life would have gone on, you know, but yeah, I'm just very glad I
didn't. Gap aside, what is the best and what is the worst career advice you feel like you've ever gotten? And not that you had to take either, but what are you looking back say like, man, I would never tell anyone to do that, or like, God, this is like the number one thing I would tell an actor.
Worst career advice I ever got. I have to think about that. Best career advice, right out the gate, I already have that in my head. Best career advice I ever got, moving to New York City. My mom dropped me off at the station. She was like in the driver's seat car, whatever, probably a nervous wreck, but not showing it. We get there, we pull up, she turns off the car, and she says to me something that she had said to me my entire life, but for the first time I heard it in a like very large way. She said, Uzo, when you get there, just work hard. Just work hard. I've never heard of nothing coming from hard work. Just work hard. And she was saying it, I don't know if it was, you know, my family's from Nigeria. I don't know if it was like, this was like my, whatever, you know, proverbial voyage, whatever, to my new world, you know, or if she was just terrified, which she probably was, you know, but I just remember her saying it very deliberately. And she had said it to all of my siblings our whole life, but somehow the way she either said it or the way I was hearing it just sounded different for the first time. And I remember being like, I need to just work really hard. Like, I'm not gonna waste, you know, I'm throw away my shot, you know, like I'm just, like I'm not going, I just have to work really hard. And I still believe that. I still hold on to that being very true today. Yeah. I guess the worst, now this is coming to me. I had a job that had come to me that I knew I was underselling myself, and I knew it while being told by, this is a million years ago, an agent I was working with at the time. And she said to me something like, take it, knowing that we just finished a conversation that I was underselling myself. She's like, take it. I don't know if anything better would come along for you, something like that. And I remember after that, it was like immediately we said yes. Seconds later, they offered a man that they said they had no money, like 3 times as much money to join the company. And I remember laying there in bed thinking to myself, I will never undersell myself again.
Well, we certainly are glad that you made that decision. Continue to make fantastic choices for us to at least enjoy. I cannot wait to see what else you do next, and really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. And I don't want to thank you just for myself, but on behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation. And we want to thank all of the viewers for joining us and listening to you share your experience and process and craft. These fellow performers and artists, love to eat up these morsels of things, especially at this time when we're all at home. So I appreciate you taking the time. I wish you well. I wish you all well watching at home. Remember to continue to stay safe and stay creative.
Yes.